Okay, let's continue on. The second, we've talked about, first of all, I talked about why we're studying the Bible. We're finished that now. And that we're going to concentrate on two figures. The Moses from the Jewish scriptures, and Jesus, his teachings from what would be called the New Testament or the Injil. The next group of people the other group of people we want to look at is the Greeks. So that will be the third group. Okay, first of all, who were they? They basically were people living around 500 BC. At that time, the situation was a lot like in the China Warring States period, where you had some great philosophers like Confucius and Lao Tzu arising. Similarly, the situation was very similar there in China at that time, with different small states fighting among each other. It was similar to what was happening in Greece, many small states struggling against each other. Let's take a quick look at the map so you can see where we are. So here we are in Taiwan, way down here. So Greece is basically that we'll be looking at our people who lived right over in this little area. So as I say, well, China was having the Warring States period at 500 BC. Greece was also having the equivalent of the Warring States period. And we can zip in on Greece so you can get an idea of what it looks like. It's in this little area here. There are many states, small states here that were fighting amongst each other. So out of this melange, we started to get a number of philosophers. Crucial for us is we'll be looking at Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and a little bit about Homer. Homer was a little bit earlier. So these were the Greeks, and they had a strong influence. So let's look at the first one, Socrates. He had strong influence. One area of his influence is in teaching. Okay, so Socrates was a teacher. Confucius talked about how we teach. Now, the way Socratic method is even used today and shows a difference in thinking between how the West and the East do education. Traditionally, in Chinese education, it's like a Confucian education. You learn, the teacher speaks, you memorize, you learn what the teacher said, you repeat, you do well on the test. That's not how Socrates said we should teach. His teaching style was very different. The teacher should ask questions. The students should think. The teacher asks more questions. The students keep thinking. The students ask teacher questions. The teacher asks students questions. So it's an issue of questions. And this style of teaching is called the Socratic Method, using questions to help a person learn. The next person, crucial Greek, was Aristotle. Many people say Aristotle is the smartest man who ever lived. Smarter than Einstein, smarter than Newton. Aristotle worked in all areas. One crucial area he worked on is logic, in developing rules for how we can argue what is true and what is not true. He was also the tutor or the teacher of Alexander the Great, and he taught him how to do war and how to conquer over other nations. So Aristotle, a very important teacher. You could say he's a little bit like Chinese have Sun Tzu and the ancient art of war, teaching out how to think. Also, they had strong influence, these Greek people, on physics. For example, Ptolemy. He is the person who proposed that the Earth is the center of the universe. And that influence right up until Galileo in around the 17th century. People kept thinking all the way from 500 BC to the 17th century, the Earth is the center of the universe. That's from the Greeks. Ptolemy. Also up until around people like Boyle and the scientific revolution, people thought that everything was made out of 4 elements. That was Empedocles who argued that. And he gave this idea that earth, water, fire, and air, everything is made up of a combination of these 4 things. Archimedes gave the principle of buoyancy. In mathematics, we have crucial people like Pythagoras doing geometry. You know that. C squared equals A squared plus B squared for a right angle triangle. That's Pythagoras. That comes from these Greeks. And of course, this influenced Euclid, and I think you've all studied Euclidean geometry in school and in high school, how things go together. Whether you liked it or not, you definitely study. So the Greeks are very important. They had a huge influence on the way we think and also on science. So we also want to learn a little bit about them more in this course. So finally, I want to conclude today's lecture with the gambler, Blaise Pascal. So Pascal lived around the 1600s, and he is best known as a very famous mathematician. He also did a lot of work in physics, and as a philosopher as well. Unfortunately, as you can see from his birth and death date, he only lived to be 39 years old. So this great mind only lived to be 39 years old. But he did this one interesting argument called the gambler. I'm blocking it, aren't I? You probably have studied this triangle. This is called Pascal's triangle. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 3, 1, 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. 1 plus x to the n, right, breaks down like this. If it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the coefficients. You studied this in school. That's probably why you know Pascal. All right? But let's continue on and talk about him. His gambler is a very interesting thing that he talks about how we think about our life and how we plan our lives. Okay. First of all, there's a bet. A gambler has to bet something, right? And this is like roulette reel. There you can bet black or red. Now the key thing with this bet is you can only bet once. You can only make one bet, and you have to bet on either black or red. And it has to be all or nothing. In other words, you are all in this bet. It's your life. You are going to bet and throw it all into it. Now, what's the choice? Just as in roulette, it can either be there is a God or there is no God. You can place your bet, and the bet you're using is your life and how you live your life. So you can bet that there is no God and live your life as if there's no God, or you can bet that there is a God and try to live your life as if there's a God. Now, that's the bet. That's the choice. Now, what's the payoff? Okay, let's say there is no God. Junda, there is really no God. The truth, this is the truth. This is the truth table. This is your guess. Guess. There is a God, there is not a God, there is a God. There is not a God, there is a God. You guess, and really, okay, let's say really there is no God, and you guess that there's no God. Well, you will die. And you were right. And your life will end and you're dead. Okay, let's assume there's no God, but you guess that there is a God. Well, you will die, and that's the end of your life, and you'll never know you were wrong because you're dead. On the other hand, if there really is a God, and you bet that there is no God, you'll end up dead too, okay? But if you bet if there is a God and you bet there is a God, well, that's bingo. You will get payoff. There will be a payoff. You have bet correctly, and there is. So Pascal's argument would be any gambler would put his money on theism because it's the only way you can possibly gain anything after you die, so that you will be gambling on theism. That's what Blaise Pascal's argument, that a gambler should do this. And that's finally, so in conclusion, his argument was a person should then try to spend their time in their life looking for God or trying to find God, even if there is no evidence true for or against God. So let's move. Okay, so I think as we continue why we're studying, I think one key that we need to remember as we look at these books, these great speakers, teachers, the key that they are concerned about is relationships. Relationships are the key thing that they're interested in. Okay? There are two types, there are different relationships. There is God and man relationships. There are man versus man relationships. Man, woman, father, son, husband, wife, co-workers, teacher, student. These are man-man. There are God-man relationships we have to worry about. How do we relate to God? How does God relate to us? There is man relating to nature. And how should nature relate to man? That means like man relating to the animals relating to man, and how we care. These are the relationships that are concentrated on. So different philosophers concentrated on both. Like Confucius concentrated on man-man relationships, right? When he was asked about God-man relationships, he said no. He spent all his time worrying about man-man relationships. In contrast, like Moses, he talked about God-man relationships as well as man-man relationships, and also man-nature relationships. Jesus also talked about all of these. The Greeks concentrated on man-man relationships and how men should relate. So if we look at this, hopefully as we study, we can try to think, how can this help us improve our relationships? So my hope is that as we study together, that you will think. Always think. I want you to think, is this true or is this a lie? Is Aristotle right? Is Aristotle wrong? Is Socrates right? Is Socrates wrong? What is good about the way Socrates thought? What is wrong about the way Socrates thought? What is good about what Moses said? Is there something I disagree with from Moses? What about Jesus? What do I think about what he's saying? Do I disagree? Do I agree? Think. Is what he's saying true? Is it logical? Is it consistent? And finally, I hope that you, as we study together, you will be able to express your opinions and ideas in the small groups. That's why we want to do small groups, so as much as possible, so that we can share our ideas. Because your thinking and my thinking will be different. Definitely, I'm coming from a Western culture. You're coming from maybe Taiwan. If you're coming from Africa, it will be different too. If you're coming from Vietnam, it will be different too, because your education, your background, even you're coming from different parts of Taiwan, and everyone has a different background, so their thinking is going to be different. I hope that in this class that we can interact and study together. All right? Okay. So, that's all for today's class. I hope you have a good weekend. And as soon as okay, thank you.